later in my early 20s, I became the assistant warden for a hostel for street homeless drinkers. And the person who was the warden was off on long-term stress. So really, I was the only person there for 12 people, and I was 21 years old. And I was also doing other jobs in the evening and various things. It wasn't my intended career. And one day, and I think it may have been the only time in my life this has happened, I was in my office in this hostel old building, and I fell asleep on my desk because I was doing loads of different jobs. And when I woke up, I was on my desk with a coat draped over me. And when I went up, there was a notice on the door saying, "Shh, Rhoda's sleeping." To the rest of the residents. So, you know, I had to ensure that it was a dry house. If anybody came back and they were drinking, they had to leave because the community was so important. But I was not at risk, 21-year-old woman, because there was a community of care. There were risky moments, but there was a community of care. Later, I became the senior counsellor in a community-based counselling service called Breakaway, and I'd been running that for 6 years as a charitable process, and then it was decided that only qualified people could run such a service. So it pushed me out, and someone else came in who was qualified. And there's so many things, you know, that when you think of the community and the voluntary sector and third sector, that the passion for the work is so important. And what happened in that changeover was within 2 years that service had disappeared because there wasn't the passion. There was appropriate qualification, and that just depends. You know, people run these things with their hearts, don't they? And as well as their heads. So, but what had that helped me with was it threw me into my social work qualification. So I became qualified as a social worker and worked 3 or 4 years in child protection. But then, very luckily, was asked to lead on what was seen as a specialist arm of social services, attending to drugs and alcohol. So I was able to develop within a statutory service an alcohol and drug focus. That was very rare. That was very rare in social services.
Incredibly rare. And I didn't realise in that journey, despite knowing you for as long as we did, that we both have that step into social work from counselling. So I didn't realise that. I did counselling, and it was my counselling supervisor who said, I think you really need to do social work. you need to be more active and not just the reflective mirror for people, but you want to roll your sleeves up and challenge some of the systems. So you better go and do something that enables you to do that.
Indeed, and the combination I think is really, really helpful, because what you've learned through that is the real attentive nature of each human being, what's unique in them, you know, that affects their potential for challenging and changing difficult parts of their lives. And I think when you focus just on that therapeutic conversation, you learn so much, don't you? Yes. Then you translate that into how that therapeutic conversation works within a setting where you're advocating, you're building support, you're doing so many proactive things. But I don't know how you feel, but it's always been a very important strand.
I think so, and it's such an important strand that actually when I do research interviews, people often refer to them as therapeutic, and I think that's really strange. And obviously it still remains today in the style that that you have conversations with people, I think. So it doesn't go, it doesn't leave you. So you'd said that obviously you had the opportunity to develop, and it was unusual, at that point in time. We only had 2 types of a provision really in the community for alcohol and drugs, didn't we? We've had a very statutory, quite medical service, or we'd have had some of the what we would have called then the old voluntary sector, and they were usually councils on alcohol, weren't there, and things like that, and there were several down in South Wales, one like Carder was very famous. There were lots of those down in there, and
Yeah.
obviously Cais in the north.